Hello and welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host Kirill, and today we're going to be discussing the history of the Ohrid Archbishopric, the history of the Macedonian Orthodox Church, and the resolution of the Macedonian schism, which occurred just this past week. Before we get into all that, however, I do want to give you all a reminder that next weekend will be our first monthly members-only Q&A video. For those of you who have not done so, if you go down below, click on the join button, you can become a member of Samuel's Fortress, and you will have exclusive access to our monthly Q&A videos where you can have a chance to ask me a question. So go ahead and do that if you have not done so already. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into the topic for this week. Now, if we go back a couple thousand years to the early 1st century AD, we will see that at this time, during the life of Christ, that Macedonia and the Balkans are incorporated within the Roman Empire, and that the Roman inhabitants of Macedonia and the Balkans are still worshiping pagan gods. However, after the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ, we will see the Christian faith begin to spread throughout the Roman Empire. Famously, it is St. Paul the Apostle who first brings the Christian faith to Macedonia and to Europe. And for those of you who are familiar with the life of St. Paul, you will know that the Roman authorities don't treat him very well. He is beaten, jailed, and chased out of Macedonia for spreading the Christian faith. And over the next several centuries, we will see that although Christianity does spread throughout the Roman Empire, that the Christians themselves are very harshly treated by the Roman authorities. They face severe persecution and so forth. Now, this persecution of the Christians will last until the 4th century AD, until the reign of Constantine I, who is the first Christian emperor of Rome. And for those of you who are familiar with the legend of Constantine I and the Battle of Milvian Bridge, basically at that battle in 312 AD, Constantine I looks up and sees a cross of light in the sky, and he sees the words "entautonika," which in Greek mean "by this sign you shall conquer." The Battle of Milvian Bridge results in a decisive victory for Constantine I, and this inspires his conversion to Christianity. Shortly thereafter, actually the subsequent year in 313 AD, Constantine I issues the Edict of Milan, which will legalize Christianity throughout the Roman Empire. And then in the subsequent years, Christianity will actually become the official state religion of the Roman Empire. It will be a couple centuries later, in the 6th century AD, under the reign of Justinian, where the Pentarchy is established. And the Pentarchy is essentially a system where the Roman Empire is divided into 5 patriarchates, and each patriarchate will have ecclesiastical jurisdiction over different regions of the Roman Empire. So here we can see a British map from the year 1800 that shows the territorial boundaries of each of the 5 original patriarchates of the Orthodox Church, or the Pentarchy. If we zoom in here to the northwest corner of the map, in this kind of pinkish reddish area up here, we see the eastern boundaries of the Patriarchate of Rome. Now, we can't see the city of Rome because this map is kind of focused on the eastern Mediterranean, but obviously the city of Rome sits up further up into the Italian peninsula up here on the left side of the map, and pretty much extends west all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, to Spain, to Portugal, basically covering the entirety of the western portion of the Roman Empire. And as we can see here, it goes east all the way to this line right here, which is essentially the boundary between the Roman territory of Macedonia and Thrace. So pretty much everything from Portugal to Macedonia will be under the, or was under the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of Rome. To the east of that boundary, and this line that kind of runs through modern day Bulgaria, to the east of that line in this green region, that is the Patriarchate of Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, and we can see that this territory essentially covers the regions of Thrace and most of Anatolia. So that is the Patriarchate of Constantinople. If we go down to this kind of light blue region here, we can see the Patriarchate of Antioch. This patriarchate covers the island of Cyprus, southern, modern Turkey, the southern portion of modern Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. It's kind of the Levant, the Near East, and that again is under the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Antioch. If we scroll down, again, in this kind of pinkish color, we see the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, which covers the regions of Palestine, Israel, and it is obviously the smallest of the 5 patriarchates that we see here. And then finally, in this yellow area here in the northeast corner of Africa, we see the Patriarchate of Alexandria, basically centered in Egypt. And those are essentially the 5 patriarchates, the pentarchy, and their original jurisdictions. Despite the fact that Christianity had established a firm foothold in Macedonia, in the Balkans during this period of time, the Christian faith is actually threatened pretty early on in late antiquity as a result of various different barbarian pagan raids which occur in the region. Here we're mainly talking about Gothic tribes, among others, who begin raiding deep into Rome's Balkan territories in this period of late antiquity. As a result of these Gothic raids, large portions of the Roman population will flee to walled Roman cities such as Thessaloniki in order to avoid these Gothic invasions, raids, and so forth. Now, these barbarian raids will occur well into the 5th century AD, and this will result in a pretty significant depopulation of the region. Now, this demographic void which is left in the Balkans in late antiquity as a result of these Gothic and barbarian raids will be filled in the 6th century AD with the arrival of the Slavs. The Slavs will come down in overwhelming numbers and shift the demographics of the region. One of the things that results from this Slavic invasion or migration is a reversion back to paganism. The Slavs are pagans, and they bring their pagan faith with them. The Roman Christians, like I said, mainly flee back to these walled Roman cities, and they remain Christians there. However, in the quote-unquote hinterlands of the Balkans, many of the Romans will actually revert back to paganism, or really don't have much of an effect as far as kind of preserving their Christian faith. And the reason why we think this is the case is because archaeological evidence shows that during these subsequent couple centuries, the 7th and 8th century AD, there are no new Christian churches built in Macedonia and the Balkans. So this leads us to believe that the Roman Christians who remained in the region either reverted back to paganism, or they did not express their Christian faith through the building of new churches, and that the Christian faith was weakened as a result of the overwhelming Slavic pagan presence there. Now, during this period of time in the 7th century AD, while Macedonia is being essentially repaganized by the Slavs, a new group of people will arrive in the Balkans known as the Bulgars. The Bulgars come into the Balkans after their old state collapses. That state was known as Old Great Bulgaria and was located in modern-day eastern Ukraine / southwest Russia. When the Bulgars, under the leadership of Asparuch, arrive in the Balkans in the late 7th century, they bring their pagan faith with them. Now, eventually, the Bulgars will clash with the Romans, with the Byzantines, and the Bulgars under Asparuch will be successful. They will establish their own state, which will eventually grow into the First Bulgarian Empire. Over the next couple hundred years, from the 7th to the 9th century, we will see a massive expansion of the Bulgarian state as they begin to conquer more and more territory on the Balkans. By the middle of the 9th century, the region of Macedonia will be conquered and incorporated into the First Bulgarian Empire. Now, it is at this time, specifically in the year 852, that Bulgaria will receive its first Christian ruler, Boris I. Now, there was a prior Bulgarian Christian ruler, that is Kubrat, but he was the ruler of the state known as Old Great Bulgaria, not this First Bulgarian Empire in the Balkans. So it is under Boris I that the Bulgarian state is Christianized. And once he begins to Christianize the Bulgarian Empire, he begins to petition the Orthodox authorities for the creation of an independent Bulgarian church. That right is granted to him in the year 870 AD, and he establishes an autonomous Bulgarian Orthodox church. With this, Christianity is formally restored in Macedonia, which is why I believe that Boris I is one of the most important figures in Macedonian history. In order to assist in the Christianization of his empire, Boris I invites the students of Cyril and Methodius to Bulgaria. Specifically, he invites Clement and Naum, who will again assist in the Christianization of the Slavs and the bringing of literacy to the Slavs. Clement is sent to the newly formed Bulgarian literary school in Ohrid, where again he will Christianize the Slavs there, spread literacy, and train a substantial amount of clergymen. Somewhere around the area of 3,500 Slavs will be trained to perform various different clerical activities, fill different clerical positions, and so forth. Eventually, Clement will become a bishop in the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, and he will be crucial in the assimilation of the Macedonian Slavs into the medieval Bulgarian identity. Naum will also be important in this. However, he first serves in the literary school in Preslav and then goes to Ohrid to assist Clement with the Slavic conversion there in Macedonia. Boris solved his problem as befitted the statesman he was. He retained the Greek clergy at the court, but on the other hand, he founded a center of Slavic culture at the monastery of St. Panteleimon near Preslav by settling some of the Slavic monks there, while the remaining Slavic missionaries, under the leadership of Clement, he sent to evangelize the outlying Macedonian provinces predominantly settled by Slavs. It is possible that Clement's field of labor was near his own birthplace, for he appears to have been a Byzantine Slav. The districts selected for Clement's missionary work were located in the southwest region of Macedonia and were known as Kutmichevica and Divul. To ensure full cooperation of the civil authorities of the region, Boris recalled the Bulgarian governor of the place and sent an official, probably a Slav, Dometa by name, to administer it in cooperation with Clement. In fact, the latter seems to have acted as a superior to the former. Clement was granted several places of residence, 3 in the district of Divul, where under his leadership a Slavic school for the training of priests and other clerics was established, and houses at Ohrid and Glavenica. At the Divul training school, Clement hoped to train in time a sufficient number of Slavic clergy to enable Boris to displace the entire Greek hierarchy and clergy. During the 7 years of Clement's headship of the Slavic school in Divul, it is said that 3,500 pupils received their education there, and were then ordained as readers, singers, deacons, and priests, and sent to their posts to carry on Slavic work. They were sent in large groups into 12 regions of the province, but extended their work even among the neighboring Serbian population. It was in this manner that the ideas and work of the great Slavic apostles of Moravia found abundant fruition in Bulgaria as well as in Serbia. Besides his preaching and teaching activity, Clement produced many translations from Greek. Later, he was appointed bishop of a dual see of Debrica and Belica, northwest of Prilep, his place at the head of the Divul school being taken by Naum, who had hitherto been presiding over the monastery of St. Panteleimon. Clement thus became the first Slavic bishop of Bulgaria. After the First Bulgarian Empire is Christianized by Boris I, his son Simeon will take control of the state and will bring Bulgaria to its high point in the Middle Ages and will reach what we refer to as the Bulgarian Golden Age. However, it will be Simeon's son Peter, which will unfortunately oversee the decline of the First Bulgarian Empire throughout the 10th century AD. And it will be under Peter's reign that the Bulgarian capital at Preslav will fall in the year 969 after a invasion by the Byzantines and by the Kievan Rus. Now, what occurs in the late 10th century is that essentially the eastern portions of the Bulgarian Empire, along with the capital Preslav, will fall. However, the western portions of the empire, centered in Macedonia, will still remain unconquered by the Byzantines. Now, there is a Bulgarian noble, Count Nicholas, who will consolidate power in the west after the fall of Preslav. And eventually one of Nicholas's sons, Samuel, will take control of these unconquered portions of the Bulgarian Empire. And again, he will consolidate power and essentially revive the first Bulgarian Empire. He will establish Ohrid, the second city of the Bulgarian Empire, as the new capital, and he will become emperor during this late 10th century period. Now, what's important to know here is that when Samuel consolidates power in Ohrid, in Macedonia, he doesn't create a new state or a new church. He simply continues on the first Bulgarian Empire and its patriarchate from a new capital, that capital again being Ohrid. We can see that he doesn't create a new church because he doesn't get rid of the title of Bulgarian Patriarchate. He doesn't create a new church with new clergymen in Ohrid. There's certainly enough clergymen there to do that. They were trained by Clement, as we went over. But instead, he simply moves the Bulgarian Patriarch Damian from Preslav to Ohrid, thereby demonstrating a continuity of this Bulgarian Patriarchate. So again, there's no creation of a new church. There's no creation of a new state. We simply see a continuity of the empire, of the church, from east to west, based on the conquest of Preslav by the Byzantines. So from Ohrid, we will see that Samuel will attempt to reconquer the lost Bulgarian lands. He will engage the Byzantine Emperor Basil II over many, many years in order to do this. I have a video specifically on Tsar Samuel and his campaign against Basil II, so check that out if you want more information on this period. But eventually Samuel will be defeated by Basil II, and the empire will collapse shortly after Samuel's death. That will be around the year 1018 AD, and Ohrid now, which is a major Christian center, a Slavic Christian center, will be conquered by the Byzantines, and the Byzantines will establish control over the church in Ohrid, and they will downgrade it from a patriarchate to an archbishopric, and it will be formally renamed the Ohrid Archbishopric of Justiniana Prima and all Bulgaria. Now, in the late Middle Ages, after the collapse of the First Bulgarian Empire, we will see the territory of Macedonia and the Ohrid Archbishopric fall under the control of various different empires. We have the Byzantines, the Latins, the Second Bulgarian Empire, the Serbian Empire, and then by the end of the 14th century, the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ohrid Archbishopric will operate independently under the Islamic Ottoman Empire for centuries. However, what changes is that in 1767, the Ohrid Archbishopric and the Serbian Patriarchate in Peć will be abolished by the Ottoman authorities. Now, the reason why they're abolished is because the Sultan will sell these churches to the Greek fanar, to the Greek fanariates, who are essentially Greek businessmen who purchase church titles such as bishop in order to extract a tax from the Christians who live in those regions, of the former regions of the Archbishopric of Ohrid and the Patriarchate in Peć. What's going on here is essentially that the Ottomans are extracting a tax from the population based on their civil administration, but then these Greek fanariates are extracting a second tax from the population from the church, not by the secular Ottoman authority. And it should be noted that these Greek fanariates are not religious men. They are simply businessmen dressed up as church officials for the sole reason of tax farming the Slavic Orthodox peasantry. And that is what occurs, again, in the late 18th century in the Bulgarian and the Serbian lands. Now, as you could imagine, the Slavic population, the Orthodox Slavic population in Macedonia, in Bulgaria, is not at all happy with the abolition of the Ohrid Archbishopric and being placed under Greek fanar rule and being subjected to these additional taxes and so forth. What we see in the early 19th century, not long after the abolition of the Archbishopric, is large-scale protests throughout Macedonian and Bulgarian lands. In 1825, there are huge protests in Skopje. These spread to other cities, and by the 1840s, there is widespread protests even in Ohrid and so forth. Now, there is a common phrase that is used throughout this period by the locals, and that is, quote, without a national church, there is no salvation. And with this phrase, with this motto, they begin demanding a restoration of the Bulgarian church. Now, I don't actually agree with the statement, without a national church, there is no salvation. I don't think that's theologically correct at all, but nevertheless, that was the slogan that they used. Now, as a result of these protests from the early into the mid-19th century, we will see that the Ottoman officials will begin to make some concessions. For example, there is a Bulgarian church that is built in Istanbul. That is kind of the first concession given to the Bulgarians. However, over the next decade, we will see that the Bulgarians start petitioning the Ottomans for a restoration of a independent Bulgarian church jurisdiction. What happens in 1860 at the Easter liturgy in Istanbul at this Bulgarian church is that the Bishop Ilarion Makariopolski, he will actually omit the name of the Patriarch in Constantinople during the liturgical prayers. Now, that is a very significant move. By omitting the name of the Patriarch, he is essentially declaring the Bulgarians independent of Constantinople. This is a de facto schism at this point. The other churches across Bulgaria and Macedonia follow suit, and the bishop in Veles in Macedonia is the first bishop after Makariopolski to begin omitting the name of the Patriarch in Constantinople. By the 1870s, all the churches in Macedonia, Thrace, Mysia, begin breaking away from the Patriarchate. Due to this and the chaos that is caused by this Bulgarian schism, the Sultan will allow for the establishment of a separate Bulgarian church, the Bulgarian Exarchate. Now, it gets a little dicey here, a little messy with the split population in certain portions of Macedonia. For example, certain regions of Macedonia have Bulgarians and Greeks living in certain cities, so it's not exactly clear which cities will belong to the Patriarchate, which cities will belong to the Bulgarian Exarchate. So what the Sultan decides is there will be elections held across these kind of border cities in Macedonia where there's a mixed population, and if a city declares that it wants to join the Bulgarian Exarchate by a 2/3 vote or more, by a supermajority, then that city will fall to the Bulgarian Exarchate as opposed to remaining under the Patriarchate Church. And most of the cities, all of the cities essentially in Vardar, Macedonia, vote almost unanimously in favor of joining this Bulgarian Exarchate Church. And it is the Exarchate Church, which is again established after 1870, that will become the center of the Bulgarian national revival in Macedonia. And in fact, membership in the Bulgarian Exarchate Church is actually a prerequisite for membership in the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. Now, Macedonia, specifically the Slavic regions within Macedonia, will remain under the Bulgarian Exarchate Church up until the end of the Balkan Wars in 1913. In 1913, we will see that the region of Macedonia will be partitioned, and aside from the region of Pirin, which remains with Bulgaria, the remainder of Macedonia will be divided north and south between Serbia and Greece. And the Exarchate, again, will lose control over these territories, and the region of Macedonia will fall under the jurisdiction of either the Serbian church in the north, in Vardar, Macedonia, or the Greek church in the south in Aegean Macedonia. The Macedonian-Bulgarian clergy who served under the Exarchate will be expelled from their local churches, and if they refuse, they will be beaten, killed, etc. This is the manner in which the Serbian Orthodox Church gains control over Vardar, Macedonia after the Balkan Wars. Now, specifically focusing on the region of Vardar, Macedonia, or the current Republic of North Macedonia, we will see that the Serbian Church will maintain control over that region from 1913 onward, aside from the brief restoration of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church during the First and the Second World War. Now, after the Second World War, we will see that the Macedonians will begin to agitate for an autonomous church in Macedonia. Now, what we have here is actually a very interesting document. It is a CIA, Central Intelligence Agency report from the year 1952 in regard to the status of the Orthodox Church in Serbia and the attempt to create a separate Macedonian Orthodox Church. So let's read this document, which is not very long, in its entirety so we can see what the CIA witnessed after World War II in relation to the Orthodox Church in Yugoslavia. So paragraph 1 states, quote, "During the last war, the Greek Orthodox Pravoslav Church of Serbia suffered heavy losses. 21 bishops died, some were murdered, and others perished in concentration camps. Of a total of 3,000 priests, about 700 were murdered, 500 died in concentration camps, and 250 were driven out of Croatia and Bosnia, losing their possessions. More than one-third of all churches and monasteries were destroyed. Heaviest losses occurred in Gornja Karlovac district, where 176 out of the pre-war total of 189 churches were destroyed. The lay members of this church, all of them Serbs, suffered a loss of nearly 1 million out of the pre-war total of 8 million. Material losses of the Pravoslav Church were estimated at about 6 billion gold dinars." Paragraph 2, quote, "The Tito government has sought to exploit this weakening of the Orthodox Church and has created a pro-communist Pravoslav clerical society, the Brotherhood of Orthodox Clergymen of the Federated People's Republic of Yugoslavia, within the National Front. But thus far the great majority of the Serb clergy has not bowed to Tito's pressure and continued to abide by Serb monarchist and anti-communist traditions. Head of the Brotherhood is Father Milan Smiljanic, a puppet and opportunist. Secretary is Father Ratko Jelic, and Treasurer Father Milan Stamenic. The society has a weekly, Visnik. The Brotherhood has had a little influence. By May 1952, only 214 priests have become members. None of the archbishops and not one of the Holy Synod has entered it." Paragraph 3. "Since the 1913 annexation of Macedonia to Yugoslavia and the incorporation of its church into the Serb Pravoslav Church, the local Pravoslavs have wanted to establish their own separate Orthodox Church independent of Belgrade, with Bulgarian and not Serbian as the church tongue. Under the 30-year rule of the Karađorđević dynasty, which represented Serb dominance and centralism, the wishes of the Macedonians were largely disregarded. The Tito government, representing communist, anti-religious centralism, considers the unity of the Serb Pravoslav Church as disadvantageous to the regime. Thus, Tito has taken up the cause of a separate Macedonian church in order to weaken the Serb Pravoslav Church and hamper its resistance to his regime by creating difficulties for it." Paragraph 4. "The VMRO, or the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, IMRO, an underground organization supporting union of Macedonia with Bulgaria, did not interest itself in church affairs until 1945. Since then, it has become one of the strongest supporters of an independent, autonomous Macedonian Pravoslav Church. VMRO infiltrated its members into the ranks of the Tito communists in Macedonia with instructions to bolster the creation of a separate Macedonian church. The Macedonians, especially the Bulgar minority, wished to create an independent Archbishopric at Ohrid, a Macedonian Holy Synod, and, more importantly, to use Bulgar as the tongue of their church instead of Serb. These demands have become stronger since the Tito regime, which fosters Macedonian church separatism but combats Macedonian efforts for a reunion with Bulgaria, invited Metropolitan Josif Cvijic to Belgrade and did not allow him to return to his seat at Skopje. This is because Metropolitan Josif is not only an exponent of church separatism, but also a protector of Macedonian separatism." Paragraph 5. "The Serb Pravoslav Church, under the leadership of Patriarch Vikentie Prodanov, is trying to prevent the creation of an independent, autonomous Macedonian church. Patriarch Vikentie, not enjoying the Yugoslav regime's full backing in this matter, has had to accept in principle minor administrative concessions, but in the main he has firmly refused the Macedonian attempt to secede. Since Macedonian church separatism goes hand in hand with national secession, the Tito regime does not give the former its all-out support and allows an independent Macedonian church to remain a dream of the Macedonians. On the other hand, the Tito regime permits the Macedonians to play openly with this idea to the extent of making serious difficulties for the Serb Pravoslav Church, whose strength and influence in the Serb people it wishes to break at all costs. Paragraph 6. Because of pressure by, redacted, public opinion and the desire to keep the flow of, redacted, undisturbed, the Tito regime recently relaxed its grips on the Pravoslav Church. For the first time since 1945, it permitted 2 priests, Father German Čorić, vicar of the Belgrade Bishopric, and Dr. Dušan Glumac, professor of theology at the University of Belgrade, to travel abroad and to visit Yugoslav refugees living outside of Yugoslavia. The number of priests jailed has also been reduced. There are at present about 75 priests still imprisoned. Otherwise, the situation of the Pravoslav Church has not improved substantially. Its greatest handicap is still the catastrophic shortage of priests. The excessive losses suffered between 1941 and 45 have not been made good. At present, there are only 2 Pravoslav theological seminaries functioning, and the lack of adequate funds makes their work difficult. Now, as we can see in this document, the Yugoslav authorities, Tito, are kind of split on whether to support a Macedonian Orthodox Church, an independent Macedonian Orthodox Church, or not. On the one hand, they are atheists and communists and do wish to weaken the Serbian Orthodox Church, so they would like to break a chunk of it off in order, again, to weaken the Serbian Patriarchate. On the other hand, there is the fear that giving the Macedonians an independent church will fuel the demand for secession for an independent Macedonian state, which Tito certainly wishes to avoid. So, again, the Yugoslav authorities are kind of split on this, but ultimately, and over the protests of the Serbian Orthodox Church, a Macedonian church will be given autonomous status in the year 1959. It will be Bishop Dositej II, who will be appointed as the Metropolitan of Skopje, however, under the Serbian Orthodox Church. At this point, the Macedonian Orthodox Church is autonomous, but not autocephalous. Now, here is a distinction that we're going to have to go over because it's going to be important from this point going forward in relation to the schism, which will occur shortly thereafter. So, an autonomous church and an autocephalous church are different in a couple of ways. So, an autocephalous church is a church in which the highest ranking bishop within that church does not have another bishop above him. He is at the tip of the pyramid, so to speak. Whereas in an autonomous church, it has its own hierarchy. It does govern its own territory. However, the highest-ranking bishop in an autonomous church still has to answer to another bishop above him, and that is the bishop of the autocephalous church, under which the autonomous church is beneath. So a way to think about this in maybe a kind of more secular setting, in a political setting, will be, for example, if we look at the Chechen Republic. There is a Republic of Chechnya. It has its own government. It has its own leader. However, that Chechen Republic is part of a greater federation, the Russian Federation. And the leader of the Chechen Republic still has to answer to the president of the Russian Federation in Moscow. So again, the autonomous church is independent in the sense that it governs its own affairs. It has its own hierarchy. It has its own structure. However, the highest ranking bishop still has to answer to someone above him. Again, that is the patriarch in Belgrade of the Serbian Orthodox Church. So this is a autonomous status, not complete full independence as a autocephalous church would have. Again, that has no one above the main patriarch. I know it's a little bit confusing, but that is how the Orthodox churches are structured. So again, what occurs in 1959 is that the Macedonians are given an autonomous church underneath the Serbian Patriarchate. Now, where things get really messy is 8 years later, in the year 1967, when the autonomous Macedonian Orthodox Church unilaterally declares autocephaly from the Serbian Orthodox Church, basically saying, we no longer wish to be underneath the Serbian Patriarchate. We are forming our own autocephalous church where there is no bishop above the highest-ranking Macedonian bishop. Now, the Serbian Orthodox Church at this point in time rightfully declares the Macedonian Orthodox Church schismatic, and that is because A church cannot unilaterally declare autocephalous status. This is like the same if, for example, tomorrow the Republic of North Macedonia unilaterally declares that it is a member of the European Union, a full member of the EU. Well, that's impossible because a country cannot just declare that it is a member of the EU. The other members of the European Union have to recognize it as a member of the EU. The other Orthodox churches, in this case, would have had to recognize the Macedonian Orthodox Church as autocephalous, which they did not. They recognized it as autonomous underneath the Serbian Patriarchate. That was the status given to it in 1959. But in 1967, its move to unilaterally declare autocephalous status is declared schismatic, not just by the Serbian Orthodox Church, but by all Orthodox churches. And at that point in time, the Macedonians fall out of communion with the Orthodox Church and again are declared a schismatic church, which means in essence that they are not even an Orthodox church at that point. To be an Orthodox church means to be in communion with the other Orthodox churches. And this isn't just a legalistic matter. However, it has very serious religious implications because it is a long tradition within the Orthodox Church that when you break communion, when you become schismatic, the church and its followers lose salvation. And I will quote here from some church fathers from the first couple centuries, and we'll see what they have to say about the schismatic churches. The first quote is from Ignatius of Antioch, writing in the 2nd century AD. Quote, "Be not deceived, my brethren. If anyone follows a maker of schism, he does not inherit the kingdom of God. If anyone walks in strange doctrine, he has no part in the passion of Christ." Next quote is from Irenaeus of Smyrna, also 2nd century. He writes, quote, "The spiritual man shall also judge those who give rise to schisms, who are destitute of the love of God, and who look to their own special advantage rather than to the unity of the church, and who for trifling reasons, or any kind of reason which occurs to them, cut into pieces and divide the great and glorious body of Christ, and so far as in them lies, destroy it. Men who speak of peace while they give rise to war, and do in truth strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. For they can bring about no reformation of enough importance to compensate for the evil of their schism. True knowledge is that which consists in the doctrine of the apostles, and the ancient constitution of the church throughout all the world, and the distinctive manifestation of the body of Christ according to the successions of the bishops, by which have been handed down that church which exists in every place." Finally, a quote from Cyprian of Carthage, 3rd century. Quote, "Whoever is separated from the church and is joined to an adulteress or a schismatic church is separated from the promises of the church. Nor will he that forsakes the church of Christ attain to the rewards of Christ. He is an alien, a worldling, and an enemy. He cannot have God for a father if he does not have the church for a mother." So as we can see here by these quotes from the church fathers, schism is a very, very serious thing. It doesn't just have kind of worldly political implications, but it also has very serious spiritual implications for the members of that schismatic church. And that's why Macedonians who supported the 1967 schism or today would prefer to remain in schism for nationalistic reasons are extremely dangerous. Schism for nationalistic reasons is completely illegitimate, and that is why the 1967 schism is or was not justifiable, especially in a scenario when the Macedonians already had an autonomous church granted to them just 8 years prior. And this same standard applies to the Bulgarian Exarchate in the late 19th century. Even though the formation of that Exarchate was approved by the Sultan, it was deemed schismatic by the Patriarchate in Constantinople. Now, luckily for the Bulgarians, that schism was resolved and ended in 1945 when Constantinople recognized the autocephalous Bulgarian Patriarchate. But again, these schisms for nationalistic reasons, whether in 1967 in Macedonia or even the formation of the Bulgarian Exarchate, are not approved of by the church and have very, very serious spiritual implications. Now, being fully cognizant of the severe consequences of being in schism, starting in the early 2000s, the Macedonian Orthodox Church began to take steps in order to heal the schism, to resolve its issues with the Serbian Orthodox Church. And the first major step in this direction was the so-called Niš Agreement, which was signed in the city of Niš in Serbia in 2002 between the Macedonian Orthodox Church and the Serbian Orthodox Church. Basically, what this agreement did was restore the pre-1967 status quo. Essentially, this agreement is the same agreement that was entered into in 1959, granting the Macedonian Orthodox Church autonomous status underneath the Serbian Orthodox Church. And of course, this would bring the Macedonians back into full communion with the other Orthodox churches. Now, the Macedonian Orthodox Church and its bishops were prepared to sign this agreement. However, once the agreement became public, there was massive, public pressure, outrage, and so forth. And under this pressure, due to the Macedonians simply preferring to remain in schism rather than be in communion and autonomous within the Serbian Orthodox Church, in my opinion, not fully comprehending the consequences of being in schism. Again, they pressured the Orthodox Church, the Macedonian Orthodox Church, to back out of this agreement, which the majority of the bishops did. Only one bishop, Jovan Vrniškovski, stood by that agreement and signed it. Then the next step occurred in 2005, on the feast day of St. Cyril and Methodius, when that agreement, that Niš agreement, was fully realized, and the Serbian Orthodox Church granted autonomous status to the Ohrid Archbishopric. Basically, Jovan Vrniškovski, who was the only bishop, again, to sign the Niš agreement, became the archbishop of the new church, which was named the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric. And for what it's worth, Jovan Vrniškovski is also very good on the Macedonian question.
Сега дојда комунистите и направија историја. И ние до денес живееме со фалсификатот во суштина кој го наметнаа. Некој нормално истражуваат денеска, не може веќе во ова време на интернет да бидат заслепени сите. Меѓутоа, повеќето на жалост се уште не стигнале да видат дека многу факти кои се прилагаат во историјата денес на Македонија се фалсификувани факти. Еве еден ќе ви кажам, да речеме за цар Самуил. Цел свет знае дека се ославувал цар Български.
Now, the fallout from this Niš agreement in 2002 created a great deal of chaos within Macedonia, and that is because the majority of the bishops within the Macedonian Orthodox Church backed out of that agreement, yet Jovan Vrniškovski went along and signed it, and therefore two separate churches were created in Macedonia. You had the Macedonian Orthodox Church, the schismatic church, which is supported by the vast majority of the Macedonian population on one hand, and then on the other hand, you had this new Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric, which is in full communion with all of the Orthodox churches. It's in canonical communion, but is only supported by a small minority of the Macedonian population. And that is the church which was led by Archbishop Jovan. Now, Archbishop Jovan and the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric faced immediate persecution by the Macedonian state authorities. There were churches and monasteries belonging to this Ohrid Archbishopric which were attacked by or with the support of the Macedonian state. For example, after almost a decade of persecution by the Macedonian state, the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric wrote a letter to the Council of Europe Strasbourg complaining of the treatment it received by the Macedonian authorities. And there's a long list of complaints in that letter, but in there it contains a paragraph that writes, quote, "In February of 2004, the monastery St. John Chrysostom in the village of Nizepole was broken into by armed and masked men who, not finding the Archbishop Jovan whom they were after, harassed and threatened the nuns with machine guns, cut their hair, and set the monastery on fire. Until this day, the police have not found the perpetrators. The church within the St. John Chrysostom Monastery has been illegally demolished by state authorities on the 15th of October, 2004. Beyond that, during the period of time after the Niš agreement was signed, Archbishop Jovan was subject to illegitimate criminal prosecution and ended up serving significant periods of time in jail. Now, It should be noted that these actions by the Macedonian state were widely condemned. They were condemned by the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Constantinople. They were condemned by the Moscow Patriarchate in Russia, by the Greek Orthodox Church, by the Orthodox Church in America, and by the Council at Mount Athos, as well as by the United States and the European Commission. So the treatment of Jovan and the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric were, again, widely seen as completely illegitimate forms of religious persecution by the Macedonian authorities. Now, having failed to solve this issue in 2002, having failed to resolve the schism, and in fact making the problem much, much worse with the persecution of the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric and of Archbishop Jovan himself, the Macedonian Orthodox Church desperately wanted to resolve this matter once and for all, and in 2017 took steps to finally get that done. What occurred in 2017 is that Archbishop Stefan of the Macedonian Orthodox Church wrote a letter to the Bulgarian Orthodox Church asking the Bulgarians to become the mother church of the Macedonian church. So what this was an attempt to essentially regain canonical recognition through unity with the Bulgarian church, which was obviously a autocephalous church in full communion with the other churches. And the Bulgarians initially accepted this offer, and they began attempting to work out an agreement to get this done. However, in the months following this, the Bulgarian church ultimately decided not to accept the offer, and that was due to significant external pressure. Basically, you had the Serbian church, the Greek church, the Russian church, all opposing the Bulgarian Orthodox Church being the mother church of the Macedonians due to the Serbian Orthodox Church's rightful canonical claim over the territory of Macedonia. Essentially, in order to resolve this schism, the consensus is that Macedonia has to return to the Serbian Orthodox Church because that was the church which gave it its autonomous status. That was the church in which it last was last in communion with the other Orthodox churches. So basically, the whole consensus was that the only solution to resolving this schism is through the Serbian Orthodox Church. The Macedonians can't go through Bulgaria or any other church. In fact, even the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew wrote that, quote, "The actions of the sister church of Bulgaria were wrong. It complicates matters, and the mother church of all Balkan nations is that of Constantinople." So basically, this deal with the Bulgarian Orthodox Church falls through, and the Macedonians begin working with Bartholomew, the Ecumenical Patriarch, to heal this schism. Now, since 2018, when the Bulgarian deal kind of fell apart, the issue kind of goes beneath the surface again. There's some negotiations behind closed doors in order to kind of resolve the schism, but essentially it disappears from kind of the headlines, and we don't really have much in the realm of updates in regard to what's going on with the Macedonian Orthodox Church, with resolving the schism and so forth. But that all changes earlier this month, May of 2022, when the issue resurfaces in a very big way. So the first thing that occurs a couple weeks ago on May 9th is that the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew recognizes the canonical status of the Macedonian Orthodox Church and essentially enters into communion with the church that was deemed schismatic just prior. At that point, the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew indicates that it's still up to the Serbian Orthodox Church to settle all administrative issues with the Macedonian Orthodox Church and to resolve this schism once and for all. 2 days later, on May 11th, 2022, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church essentially echo the Ecumenical Patriarch and encourage the Macedonian and the Serbian Church to resolve this matter. Just 5 days later, on May 16th, the Serbian Orthodox Church announces that it will accept the Macedonian Orthodox Church as an autonomous church underneath the Serbian Patriarchate, essentially reestablishing the relationship between the two churches that existed prior to 1967. So again, this is a restoration of that 1959 agreement. Immediately thereafter, the Macedonian Orthodox Church accepts this offer by the Serbian Orthodox Church to restore Macedonia's autonomous status as it existed prior to 67. And 3 days later, on May 19th, 2022, in Serbia, a reconciliation liturgy is held where Patriarch Porphyrie of Serbia and Archbishop Stefan of Macedonia come together and formalize this agreement and thereby bring Macedonia back into full communion with the Orthodox churches. Archbishop Jovan of the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric is also present at that liturgy, and he indicated that he will be retiring for health-related issues, apparently as a result of his years of imprisonment in Macedonia, and that he plans, as far as I have understood, he plans to become an abbot at a monastery and retire as a bishop. Now, there's still a couple of unresolved questions that exist in regard to this autonomous church in Macedonia. First being the name of the church. It can't be called the Macedonian Orthodox Church because the Greeks dispute that name. You have the Greek Orthodox Church. Additionally, you have the patriarchates, which are governed by Greeks, and they will simply not allow the church to be called Macedonian Orthodox Church because of the naming dispute with Greece. Unclear whether they would be okay with the name Church of North Macedonia, but just calling it the Macedonian Orthodox Church is not going to happen. The Ecumenical Patriarchate indicated that no one has any problems with the term Ohrid being used as the basis for the church. Now, what the full name is going to be is unclear, but it is a archbishopric, which will carry the name Ohrid, so it is logical that it will most likely be called the Ohrid Archbishopric or some derivative thereof. For example, Archbishop Jovan's church was called the Orthodox Ohrid Archbishopric, and no one had any problems with that name. It was in full communion, so it's possible that that name or a similar name could be used, but it will most likely be called the Ohrid Archbishopric and not the Macedonian Orthodox Church because of the Greek dispute surrounding the name Macedonia. We'll still have to see what the formal name will be. Additionally, there's some debate over whether the Serbian Orthodox Church will grant the Macedonian Church, this new autonomous church, the autonomous Ohrid Archbishopric, whether it will be granted autocephalous status sometime in the future, whether it will kind of permanently remain autonomous under the Serbian Church, or whether at some point in the near or distant future it will be given autocephalous status and the Ohrid Archbishopric will no longer need to be under the Serbian Patriarchate. We don't know either of those the answers to either of those questions yet. However, what is important is that as of May 19th, 2022, the Macedonian Church is autonomous under the Serbian Patriarchate. The schism is fully resolved, and the Macedonians are now in full communion with the Orthodox Church.